Everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Sylvia Mukasa. I'm a production manager for the Natural History Unit in Bristol. I'll be leading today's session with my colleagues Elena Boateng, who is a production manager for BBC Studios Factual Podcast Unit, and Sahala Ahmed, who is a production management assistant for Top Gear, a series many of you will know well. We work in production management for BBC Studios Productions, the most awarded British production company in the UK today, with 79 awards and over 300 nominations in the past year. BBC Studios produces more than 2,500 hours of programmes covering everything from comedy to factual to drama, entertainment and music, many clips of which were featured in the sizzle that many of you saw as you just joined this Zoom. Also, beyond the BBC channels, our teams also produce shows for broadcasters and platforms across the world. We're here today to talk about being part of an incredible community of production management professionals whom, as I love to say, make the magic happen. We manage the logistics, budget, schedules and compliance for the content many of you hopefully know and love. We are creative can-do thinkers and constantly thinking about how we can turn the most imaginative and innovative ideas into reality and put those onto the screens of our audiences. Need to get a crew to film in Madagascar? Okay, production management can do that. Need your presenter to travel across 5 countries in a limited edition motor car worth thousands of pounds? Okay, we'll do it. Need to set up a shoot across multiple countries in the middle of a global pandemic? Okay, we'll make that happen. And more impressively, we'll do it safely, compliantly to time and to budget. Our roles stand in equal status to the producers, directors and researchers of the content, who are often referred to as the editorial teams. We work together along with a wider support network of development, legal, commercial, insurance and various publicity teams to take the original ideas and creative visions for a show and shoot or series and transform these into a reality. If our editorial colleagues are the architects, then we're the builders who transform these incredible visions into reality. In today's session, Elena, Sahala and I plan to give you an insight into the role that production management teams play within television and content production, hopefully give you a better understanding of our day-to-day activities. The spoiler alert, no 2 days are the same. Hopefully we'll also give you an insight into our experiences of working in the industry and share some practical and useful tips for anyone starting out, maybe thinking of a change of career or just generally keen to find out a little bit more about what we do. So that's just the general introduction, but with no further ado, let me introduce my colleagues. All of us are going to tell you a little bit about how we got started and how we got to do what we're doing now. And I'll firstly start with Elena. So Elena, lovely to have you here today. And you're a production manager of the BBC Studios Factual Podcast Unit, and it's fantastic to have you on this panel. And though we'll come back to your current role in more detail, can you tell us a bit about how you got started in TV and the journey that you've been on to do the role that you do now?
Thank you so much, Sylvia, and thank you, everyone. It's such a joy to be on the webinar today with you all. So like Sylvia said, my name is Elena Boateng. I work in the BBC Studios Factual Podcast Department. In terms of how I got into media, so I always knew that I wanted to work in media, but I didn't quite know what that really meant. I went to uni and studied international business with Spanish, so a much of nothingness because I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. But I got out of uni, and the modules that I really loved at uni were the project management ones, but I didn't actually know that there was something that you could do in TV that would incorporate both. And funnily enough, I actually just Googled how to get a job in TV as soon as I came out of uni, because it wasn't something that was very accessible in terms of careers at the university that I went to. So it wasn't something that I would have known how to do myself. But when I did do that Google search, I found an organisation called Mummy Youth Project, which many of you might be familiar with now. They basically help young ethnic minorities get into the media industry by giving them access to it through doing a 3-month internship where you make a TV show, which is now for Sky. When I was doing it, it was for Pick TV instead of Sky One now, which is amazing. They've got their own studios and everything, so it's come really far. But it's such a brilliant organisation in terms of getting the opportunity to actually make television. So you do that across the space of 3 months, and you're actually producing something that's going to be on TV, which is amazing. So it's not the ordinary work experience where you're being asked to just shadow someone no, you have a deadline, you have a task, you have something that you need to do at the end of it. So that was a phenomenal experience. I really enjoyed it, and it basically catapulted me onto working on the One show for Credible, the Queen's Victory in Europe Day. We did Glastonbury, so many different things and festivals that I've gone along to by being a part of that show. And since then, I've just moved around the organisation. That was in 2014, and it's 2022. And I'm still here now, which is really, really exciting. So yeah, that's a bit about my journey.
That's absolutely amazing. And thank you so much, Elena. And you really have been on quite a journey already. So I'm looking forward to sort of finding out a bit more about your day-to-day role very shortly as well. And now also to introduce my other colleagues. So Sahala, you have been working on Top Gear so far, and it would be brilliant to know a bit more about how you've started, what you've been doing, and to go from there.
Cool. Hi everyone, my name's Sahala. I've been working at the BBC since October 2020, so very much in lockdown and at home and accustomed to Zoom. So how I got into TV is actually quite, it's not something that I imagined for myself. I never thought normal people worked on TV, kind of had no idea what the actual roles were outside of, you know, directors and producers and on-screen talent, and didn't know there was a whole world out there behind the scenes, talented people that create the TV shows that we love and enjoy to watch. So while I was at uni, I did a psychology and sociology degree, and I enjoyed doing events with the SU. So I did a lot of event management stuff, and just took part in loads of different societies. And through that, and just saying yes to any opportunity that sort of came my way, I hosted an event with my friend, and we met a lovely woman from the BBC who introduced me to the world of production management. And she sort of described it as, oh, if you can put on an event, just think something more long and streamlined, and you basically made a program. If someone just records your event, that's essentially what a program is. And since that day, I was really interested and quite eager to work in production management. It was something that I thought would, you know, harness the skills I already had and sort of develop those skills that I got from event management. So as soon as I graduated in 2020, I contacted the lovely woman I met from the BBC. And during my time at uni, I made sure that I continued to invite her to events I was planning at uni. And then just one day an opportunity came up, and then I was a diary assist for around a year. And then I started Top Gear in September, and we've just wrapped in season 32. So it's been very busy, a whirlwind, but it's been a really great journey, and I've enjoyed it.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing, Sahala. Thank you. And we've all been on a very different journey, and I think that's something that's going to come through time and time again, that you're going to meet and talk to various people who work in this industry, but most people will have all gone through some different path. For myself, I started my career as one of the last graduates of the 20th century. I didn't have relatives, contacts, or a shortcut into the industry, and nobody I knew worked in TV, but I've always had incredible support from my mum at home. And my journey's been one of small incremental steps and missteps to get to and kind of work out what I wanted to do. Again, sort of like yourselves have said, Elena and Sahala, I always loved TV, and you know, I thought, oh, maybe I want to be a researcher, because that was the kind of role I knew about. I chose to study at a uni that offered work placements, and following a period at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office of all places whilst at uni, they took me back because they had what at the time was a bit of a kind of soft propaganda department, or the communications team there. I worked hard, offered to help with everything. I was first one in, last one out every day. I learned a little bit about research, a bit about coordination and the dynamics of an office environment. I then moved to what was then Discovery Networks Europe. I learned a bit about the commercial world, client management, principles of advertising and sponsorship, and how they could support the business of program making, all with a greater understanding of the wider international TV market. And it was a fantastic company, but at that time the job really wasn't for me. In time, I got the opportunity to join what was then BBC Worldwide in what was a DVD and video department, and learned a bit about how to schedule and organize myself, and how to build relationships to achieve kind of joint deadlines and goals, all on time and to budget. And I kept my eyes and ears open the whole time I was there and applied numerous times, and finally got shortlisted for the BBC Production Management Trainee Scheme at the time. And by this point of entering the role, it was over 3-4 years since I'd actually graduated. So it'd all been sort of gradual steps. But that wasn't it. So when I wasn't working, I was volunteering to help out on short films or make my own content, albeit rather badly. Had a second job in a cinema at one point, and I lived, breathed and consumed as much of the industry as I could. I did what I could to develop an informed opinion, and I got out there and did what I could all the time, politely, of course, speaking to people about what they did and how they did it. My trainee scheme initially took me to Bristol, and I got there and realised I knew nobody, and I thought I'd made a huge mistake. I kept my head down and carried on, but it's when they needed a coordinator for a few weeks to help start up a new series, I got my first taste of the Natural History Unit and a new series called Human Planet, and it went from there. And it's taken over 2 decades now to build a portfolio of projects that I feel really privileged to have been a part of, each and every one of them, including a rather small series of David Attenborough called Blue Planet 2. Over that time, I've also worked as a talent manager, training lead, and everything from a diary assistant to making teas for the teams on location. I also had the chance to complete an MA in production management to try and fine-tune my professional skills as such. And I'm really passionate about what production management is and the opportunities within production management as a career, and never more so, I think, than the fact that we've all dealt with COVID and managed to keep the industry moving all the way through this pandemic. I'm constantly learning and relearning my craft, and I've been lucky enough to meet some incredible and inspirational people on my journey. And I think with that in mind, it's a great time to really talk a little bit more about our roles on a day-to-day basis. And so what we were going to do is each of us to share with yourselves just a trailer or a sizzle, just to give you a bit of a flavour of the kind of things that we're doing day to day. And so I think, Sahala, we were going to come to you first about Top Gear. So if I'm able to share a trailer for Top Gear, I will get that to play hopefully now. So Sahala, do you want to tell us a bit more about your day and your role? And
sure. So I'll go through the sort of stages that we go from in a production. So we go from pre-production, production, and the post and delivery. So during the pre-production, that's sort of when we're just setting things up. So I'll talk about specifically my role, and then Elena and Sylvia will talk about in their roles and their respective shows. So as a PMA, so that's like production secretary in different in different places other than BBC. So as the PMA on Top Gear, I would set up drives and get things ready, so different spreadsheets, and get them up and going. So things like Alba, get that set up ahead of our production, and just setting up different systems. And this period for me is the calm before the storm. So it's a bit more quieter, and there might be a bit of wrap up for the last season. So on Top Gear, we film 2 seasons a year. So we go from September to March, and then March to September again. So it's just setting things up and closing things off from last time, and speaking to the presenters' agents and seeing what sort of travel arrangements they'd like ahead of some dates if we've got any. And then the main sort of section is the production. So when we're actually filming, this is a super busy period, non-stop. So there's lots of booking hire cars and PCR tests, and speaking to the presenters' agents, and organising their travel with their drivers and sending out their movement orders. And then we get to go on location, so travelling up and down the country and filming everything. And then while the on-the-ground support that the PMA would give would just be supporting the runners, ensuring that the crew, just letting them know where their hotel is and letting them know what time food is served, and ensuring that everyone's got the radios and communicating, and just making sure that everyone's having a good time. Things are running as smoothly as they can be. And while I'm like working from home, I'd be speaking with my junior production manager and my production coordinator, and seeing what sort of things I can assist them on. So whether that's setting up the call sheet and booking hotels and all the other sort of logistic things that go into creating a production. So all the things that you sort of won't think about, but someone has to think about, and that's always what the production management team are doing, and just ensuring that things are as smooth as possible. So things of where people are going to sleep, how people are going to get in different places. And for example, when we're going abroad, just checking what the rules are in terms of COVID of getting into different countries. So we went to 2 different countries this year on our new season. So just checking what the COVID rules are, if people need to take any tests, if the country that we're going to, if they accept the COVID recovery pass, seeing what sort of hotel options we have abroad, and sort of just assisting in the day-to-day. Some weird requests that I've possibly had were once I went to one of the presenters' houses to get some forms from him, and that was an interesting experience. I've never been to a celebrity's house before. But yeah, and then during the post, so there's not very much that I'm involved in terms of the post and delivery. We've got a set person that deals with all the post-production stuff. So they're the production manager. Sometimes I may help out this person with looking at time codes and checking through the material for the next season, and just taking down notes in terms of time codes. I actually helped Sylvia at Planet Defenders. That was a program that came out to the BBC last year with some post-production stuff. And I assisted with getting some stills together, sort of just putting them into collating them all together and captioning those stills. And yeah, that was really fun. Yeah, so that's sort of the day in the life of a PMA.
That is amazing. Thank you so much, Sahara. And that's been a fantastic insight. Sorry that my sound seems to be slightly strange. It might be because I've been trying to play the videos in the background, but I hope you can hear me a bit better now. Yeah. So lovely. Amazing. So we will be doing a little bit more fairly shortly, just giving a few more tips and ideas, and obviously coming to sort of some of the amazing questions that are already coming through in the chat. But before we do, Elena, a day in the life. So before I move on to yourself, I will be now hoping to share with sound a small sizzle for so the work that you were doing in digital, because you've moved on since then. But so bear with me as I just try to share this. So
that was a documentary series that just came out at the beginning of this month on BBC Three, and it's the story of Juice WRLD, XXXTentacion and Lil Peep, who were all credited for being amazing rappers that kind of broke through the SoundCloud rap scene, and unfortunately they all died at and before 21 for a series of different reasons. And that was a program that we made for BBC Three in the end, but actually it initially was for Radio 1 and 1Xtra. And that's the really interesting thing about TV, that you can start off with a commission that you think is going to one place, and that doesn't always necessarily mean that's the only place that it ends up. So I'll kind of take you through the stages of production, just like Sahara did so amazingly for Top Gear, for this program in particular. And I'll start with pre-production, because pre-production is actually a very exciting stage of production that people probably don't talk about enough. So for a program like that, that would have been an idea that was in development for actually quite a while. So the digital documentary team department within the BBC will have come up with this idea off the back of seeing the trajectory of these artists and seeing how their stories were playing out across the years that there was a succession of their deaths. And I remember one of our fantastic assistant producers pitching it as a fantastic idea that she felt would be a really good story to tell. And at that point, we start thinking about what platforms would receive that content well. So initially we thought that it'd be a great one for Radio 1 and 1Xtra, who are now trying to expand into more documentary commissions as well. So that's the great thing about the digital space, because it's really expanding, it's changing. A lot of traditionally music-based or radio-based platforms are now expanding to create different types of content. So in that pitch, you would send a treatment, there'd be a conversation about that, and if the commissioner likes it, they'll then ask for a budget and a schedule, and that's when production management tend to get involved. We'll start talking to the editorial team about what does this commission look like actually in terms of financially. Can we do it for the kind of tier pricing that usually commissioners have? So some will say for a 30-minute documentary we can give you this much, for a 60-minute documentary we can give you this much. So you are trying to to create a program that can usually fit into a budget tiering system. So essentially we would do that as the starting point. And once all of that has been agreed with the commissioner, that's when we actually go into production. And we start with a few stages within production. So for example, we start talking about things like how we want to incorporate sustainability, which Sahala referred to a bit as well, which is Albert. So the BBC actually has a target of all of our documentaries being Albert certified, which is great. So we're always thinking about, from the jump, how we can make the production more sustainable, whether it's LED lighting being used by our lighting, our cameramen and lighting operators, or whether it's just as simple as reusable cups and flasks being used across the production. We're always thinking about that at the top of the production, sending out a green memo to all follow across the production. So that's been something that's been really good to see over the years, how that's become actually quite a staple part of production. Then we go into production itself. And what was quite interesting about this production is that all of those artists are, of course, American. All of the people that talked around their lives. So the premise of the documentary, as you will have seen, is that these artists, they shot to fame on social media and SoundCloud, and then essentially not long into their careers they'd unfortunately died, and we explore whether it was actually the pressures of social media, the pressures of constantly having to be on, as we describe in our generation these days, where you're constantly tweeting, you're constantly updating your social media platforms, because that's what you feel you have to do to engage with your audience. And so we wanted to, of course, talk to their close friends and family who would have seen their journey, seen what they'd gone through, to kind of support this premise that we were putting out there, or refute it. And they all were based in America, of course, but we were going through a pandemic. So we had to start being a bit creative about how we were going to go about filming this production, because we wouldn't be able to actually get into America, because at that stage you weren't actually allowed to fly in, of course, as we all know. So we had to do a lot of our interviews directed on Zoom, which is really interesting now, because when you think about sustainability going forward, will we always need to travel to achieve filming? Maybe not. So I got in contact with a few directors of photography who are on the ground in America, and they had already found some quite innovative ways to allow directors in the UK to be able to see a really clean feed of everything that would be happening on the ground. So what I had to then do as a production manager for this project was to find locations that these contributors could go to, find directors of photographies on the ground in the US, and basically link them up with our producer on this side, who would be on a Zoom link and be able to ask all his questions directly to the contributor, straight down the lens, and be able to treat it as much as a talking interview in person as possible, but all done remotely, essentially. Obviously, with all the COVID protocols at the time, we were thinking about things like PCR tests and lateral flow tests in the environments where cameramen and contributors were coming together. Yes, so there was a lot of self-declarations and tests that had to be done at that time, which thankfully is easing now. But those are all the kinds of things that you need to make consideration. We had to make consideration for when we were drawing up budgets and schedules. Will this take a little bit longer because of this? Will we need to be more mindful of putting in a bit of a contingency pot and things of that nature? So of course we go into the kind of just gathering footage stage. We did do some filming in the UK as well. There was a couple of contributors in the documentary who were UK based. So we did all of that filming actually within the BBC offices. So we became really resourceful about where we filmed, because the BBC office is a COVID safe environment. So we found a studio space in the office that was perfect. And we invited some of our contributors down to film them in person. And those interviews, our director was able to do in person with 2 meter distancing and wiping down their equipment as they go along and so forth. So that was great. And we basically gathered 6 different contributor interviews to piece this film together. What makes the film most interesting is, of course, because it is based on social media, a lot of the archive that is woven into the film is from social media, and a lot of that archive you can't actually clear in the traditional ways that we clear archive, where we'd usually go to the owner of the copyright and ask them permission for that copyright. With social media, it's a completely different world. It's a bit of a rogue world where you don't even really know who owns stuff. A lot of people just upload things onto YouTube, as you know, and they have no business doing so. So it makes it a little bit difficult to license it in the traditional ways that you would. So we go through a method instead called fair dealing, where you basically are legally allowed to use bits of content if you can justify it under criticism and review or quotation. There's a few different strands of it, but the ones we used the most were criticism and review and quotation. So given we were critiquing aspects of things that they would upload on social media and so forth, that was deemed to be legally just. So it is, the majority of the film is fair dealt, and we were working with an archive producer to kind of find all of these bits, to track them all down on the internet for us. So the producer would tell them what they needed, and they would source that. So I'd be involved in the process of finding the right archive producer, and then, onboarding them and building them into the team structure and making sure they had the right spreadsheets, so we knew exactly where everything had come from and how we had fair dealt it, and where the team could find it when they needed it in the edit, and all of that kind of structures and systems I would put into place, essentially. So once we had all of our archive material and we had all of our filming material, we were able to then go into post-production, and the post-production for this series was probably about 8 weeks long, maybe. And that's when we just start telling the story. So we go into an edit suite, the producer is in there with an editor, and they work day and night, basically starting to build the story and package it together. And once that's done, you then go into a part of the edit called grading, which is when you start thinking about the color, which was quite interesting for this one, because of course with social media, a lot of the coloring of things are completely different, but also that adds to the kind of authenticity of it. So you don't want to kind of make this like cinematic experience when you are using social media clips. So we kind of didn't have to use too much time in the grade, whereas with some things, maybe something like in the National History Unit, I imagine, Sylvia, you use a lot more time in the grade for that kind of thing. Then we go into the online, which is when you start doing things like captioning. And a part of the rules of fair dealing is that you actually do have to accredit whoever material you have used to the best of your knowledge, because sometimes you don't even know who that is. So to the best of your knowledge, you accredit somebody to that footage. So that's the kind of thing that we do in the online. And then we create the master document, and that's when it goes off to whoever we're delivering it to. So initially that was going to be Radio 1, and then BBC 3 launched back onto linear TV, and it was a fantastic opportunity for them to take this program as one of their first programs to air with that launch. So that was a really exciting transition for the project. And when something like that happens, a production manager then goes through a new contracting system. So we'd have to write a new commissioning deal. We'd potentially sometimes have to update the budget, depending on if that has budgetary implications, which it did, because if you're delivering something to digital, it's a little bit different to if you're delivering it to television. There's a few more things with the post-production house that you have to sort out. So yeah, there was a few budgetary implications that I had to kind of change the budget for, and then repitch and have a few conversations with commissioners and so forth. But I guess that hopefully gives you a bit of an idea of what putting that project together was like. And of course, there'll always be deliverables. So separate to the actual program that you make, you also deliver things like the trailer that I just showed you, or you take photos while you're filming so that you can have stuff to share on all our social media platforms and so forth. Yeah, I think I've covered it.
That's brilliant. No, thank you. And it's really interesting because we both work as production managers, but because it's in slightly different areas, slightly different platforms, there's quite a lot of crossover, but
100%.
Obviously, in terms of how we work, but there are also some differences as well, which I'll sort of come to and talk about just in a moment. But before I do, I will attempt to share the final sizzle and hopefully be able to play this one out okay. So let's see how we go. So that was a trailer for a show called Fantastic Beasts: A Natural History, which went out just at the end of February. And it was a new and ambitious venture and co-production with Warner Brothers for BBC One, but also working in association with the Natural History Museum. And I think what's been really interesting is listening to both Sahala and Elena is just the way that our industry has moved on so much from being just about what goes out on one channel. We're talking about multiple platforms, we're talking about multiple partners and different ways of working. And so forgive me, I've got small children in the background, so that is a slight addition to my show, but anyway. And basically the show itself was exploring the natural world and its relationship to the creatures of the mythical world. And as you could see, it was presented by Stephen Fry with the help of a slightly cheeky Niffler animation that joined him throughout the show. Like most shows, and as Elena was talking about, Fantastic Beasts went through a very detailed development and commissioning process. It went very much from a fledgling idea into a fully costed, scheduled and viable series for our co-producers, Warner Brothers, to invest in, our broadcaster BBC One as well. And also the Natural History Museum were very much a core part of that whole project. And I think one of the things that we come back to time and time again through this conversation is very much about the importance of communication within your team, communication with your third parties, your stakeholders, all of the people who have a vested interest in the show. And we worked very closely with the commercial teams, business affairs, insurance teams, editorial policy, legal teams, just to make sure that we were able to put a fully costed and worked through plan into place. And in turn, that plan informed my role throughout the production. And I worked with series producer, executive producer, production executive, to constantly respond to any changes in the editorial, the budget or the schedule, and also to mitigate for any sort of potential risks that might affect the production, set us behind schedule, and also be costly and in turn affect our ability to deliver the project. Like so many productions, we were hit when the pandemic hit in 2020. We were actually 3 months into production at the time. We were originally commissioned to be a 12-month project, and in the end, it took 3 attempts and the best part of 2.5 years to actually deliver the project, with constant changes, more communication, and a willingness to constantly seek solutions and try and find a way forward and try to find a way to film. We were initially commissioned to film all over the world, but then due to a number of reasons and everything from location availability to presenter availability, we actually ended up doing quite a lot of filming in the US, rather similar to Elena and her experience as well. And trying to do the best that we could in what was effectively a very difficult situation. The pandemic itself, as well as throwing challenges, it threw opportunities. I know, again, Elena was talking a bit about remote working and working with remote crews. We actually ended up working with a wonderful sort of set of crew members based in the US who traveled with our presenter across the US from the West Coast to the East Coast, filming sequences with him on a sort of how can I call it, a bit of a roller coaster tour, as they were going to multiple locations whilst it was a time of COVID and so rather high levels in the pandemic. And there was an incredible amount of planning that went into play to try and make those sequences work as safely as possible, but also to deliver the required editorial for the show. And then from that, there was final filming in the UK, quite a lot in the Natural History Museum, but again, a variety of locations across the UK. The thing about production is I like to think of it as quite an incredible journey. At the early stages, you've got a really good idea of where you're trying to get to, what funds you have in place to do so, and also when you need to arrive or effectively deliver the show. But at the very beginning of the whole process, you need to work out your route. So basically, how in God's name are you going to deliver this thing you've been commissioned to work on? And also, really importantly, who's going to be on that journey with you? Our teams are absolutely at the heart of everything that we do, and staffing is a huge responsibility and actually a real privilege. And, as production management, as a production manager, I work really closely with the series producer for all the shows that I've been involved in. And, we always try to recruit as broadly as possible, because it is a process. And again, we'll come back to this, I think, a bit fairly shortly, where we will recruit for skills and attitude, and ability obviously is important, but increasingly, we are trying to recruit for potential and people's ability to evolve into a role. The production management teams on these shows, as Sahala's been talking about, she's been working as production management assistant. She'll work with the production coordinators, the junior production managers, and then also production managers sort of like ourselves. And we're so central to every team, and will often come on board very much at the beginning of a production and be involved at absolutely every stage, right the way through to post-production and through to delivery. And, there are other roles, that maybe like a runner, which are sort of more shoot-specific roles, or roles that tend to be at certain stages in the whole process. But the wonderful thing about production management is very much a role that's there right the way through, and really integral to everything that's going on. We have a huge input and influence, and it's really exciting to have the opportunity to be a part of that process. The logistics and scheduling are often like a giant Tetris, but we're constantly trying to sort of fit things together and make sure we've got the kit we need, the people we need, and make sure everything sort of fits into place in order for us to deliver the shows that we're working on. And also with the budget, I think people talk about production management and you deal with a lot of finance, you deal with a lot of this, but it's so much more than just being about a spreadsheet. And I know Elena was sort of talking about this as well. And it's very much about sort of working with your team to realize the vision of a show. And you're also really keeping a close eye on events so much wider than the production. For example, more recently, some of the issues that have happened with fuel shortages, that can affect whether your team can get to a recce location or get to a shoot. Even stranger still, factors that are happening on the other side of the world, for example, in Afghanistan, might actually affect your ability to get visas and permits for another country that has suddenly had to deploy a lot of their agency staff over to an area of conflict, and all of a sudden you're left then in a waiting queue to try and then get your permit for a shoot. And obviously the war is far more important, but there are all manner of factors that can affect your ability as a team to deliver what you're trying to do. And constantly saving where necessary, but bringing value to the screen is so core to what we do. Elena talked a bit about post-production and covered a bit more about the editing process, and the deliverables are a huge part of what we do, and so much more than just the show itself. And you'll often hear us talking more about content now rather than even programs, because it's one of those things. And then right at the end of the production, we're responsible for reconciling the paperwork and budgets ahead of delivery. So I'm mindful, I've sort of rattled through that, but I'm also mindful of the time here. And in terms of I think we might just go straight to questions actually, and then that will give people a chance to respond, and also we can hopefully share some useful information with yourselves.
Yeah, I've got the questions ready to go, Sylvia.
Amazing.
And Sahara, so I will do my best to get through as many as possible. You guys have been so interactive, you've asked so many questions, so
thank you.
I'm conscious of time, so I don't know, Sylvia, will you keep me accountable in terms of when we have to kind of wrap up?
I will.
The team could just let us know, but I'll just start working from the top. So
perfect.
No discrimination here. I'm not picking questions, I'm just working my way from the top. So the first one is, actually I got the question, where did I do my internship? So just to repeat that quickly, so that was Mama Youth Project, and you can find them online. They still run the scheme now. I think they do at least 2 or 3 a year, 3-month internship where you basically make a TV show for Sky TV, a magazine show called What's Up TV, and it explores so many different topics, from comedy to current affairs, to meaningful pieces that you can just present your ideas for and create this TV show. And like I say, they've got a phenomenal network, of which the BBC is one, and they can link you up with so many different departments after completing the internship, and you have something tangible to say you've done in having an active TV show to give them. So yes, Mama Youth Project is the name. Next question is, how would you suggest someone with no degree getting into the industry? I'll let either Silver or Sahara take that one.
There's like loads of apprenticeships available. I know a few people that have got in through apprenticeships. So I think apprenticeships are great. I wish I knew of apprenticeships before I went to uni. Get to make money, no debt. And I think it's better to have like hands-on experience. And yeah, just networking and seeing different events that you can go to and just meeting people that will give you that opportunity.
I absolutely second that. And you've got groups as well like Creative Access, and and again, depending what part of the country or even the world, actually, even I think in some instances that anyone is listening from, there are so many opportunities in production management right now, and I think there's a real realization of how important it is to bring people through. So there will be, I think we've already seen a few links coming up in the chat already, but please do follow up on that. Do also go on the BBC website as well. I know the BBC is also trying to look really broadly about bringing people in, be it as on an apprenticeship basis, but also thinking really creatively about, okay, well, how can we bring people in? Transferable skills is another massive area as well for people who've worked in other industries. But I think, you were touching on it, Sahala, in terms of events management and, those complementary skills that can be brought from different areas. And, as I say, I really feel like the industry is opening up, but, I'll be honest, in my time, and it's been a good couple of decades now, but I have never known such a massive demand for what we do. And that's a really great place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really segues well into the next question, which was, if switching careers, do you have to start from the bottom, or are there ways to transfer across on the same level? And I think you touched on that really well, Sylvia, in terms of transferable skills. And I think that's the wonderful thing about television, actually. It's just, it doesn't require you to have gone to do a specific degree, or it's not vocational in that way. You very much can use your experience from event management. You very much can use your experience from managing teams in other areas to qualify as a production manager, a production coordinator, a production management assistant. So yeah, definitely be reassured that that's a route in for sure. The next question after that, a question on age. Are you at a disadvantage if you are not a graduate? I think we've kind of answered that as well, haven't we? We said about the apprenticeships. And another question, I think this is one for you directly, Sahala. It says, how do you handle the risk assessments, especially on a show such as Top Gear?
Well, luckily, risk assessments are more for the editorial side. And we also do have a lot of support from the BBC Health and Safety team. So depending on how crazy our shoot is, we'll have a member of the BBC Health and Safety team come out with us. So they'll come out with us on a recce. They'll see what's going on and what our plans are. And they'll help with the risk assessment as well. So there's loads of people across it, but risk assessment is editorial forte.
Oh, very much so. But we're aware of obviously what the planning is, but yeah, it is they'll lead in that respect. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And often actually we do collaborate a lot with our health and safety department. So they're always there to advise us and kind of work really closely with the editorial teams to create risk plans and comms plans. And yeah, so you don't have to feel as though like, all of that risk is on top of your head and what am I going to do and what if something happens? Like, it is a really collaborative process in that way. So there's tons of help for that. The next question says, what criteria are BBC journalism apprenticeship schemes looking for in an applicant? I can't say that I've personally applied for it. I don't know if you have any more insight than me, ladies. Otherwise, I think our talent managers might be better placed.
Absolutely. And at that point, I just want to mention as well that our brilliant talent managers, James Urakowski and Lorraine Heaton, will be running a seminar running on from this on the 4th of April. There will be opportunities. There we go. I think here we are. A bit more about the forthcoming seminar. So they will follow on from many of the things we've talked about today, and also give a greater insight, as well as more in terms of apprenticeships, career movement, anything like that as well. So you can always find out a lot more there, and there's an email address put on, so please do make contact.
There's a lovely question here from Jolie with regards to where to start. And I don't know that we've really given that much insight yet in terms of getting in. So that's quite a good question for us to share a bit of our kind of tips and tricks for getting in. I'll let you start, Sylvia.
Okay, I would genuinely say I think we're all at very different points in terms of you know, I don't know whether this is somebody who's working elsewhere or not even been working yet. So I would just say to anybody, you know, going back to this sort of factor about transferable skills, you know, ultimately this is an industry about communication, and it's so much about attitude as it is about, you know, the skills and anything that you've learned in education or anything in that respect. But I would just say to try and get that opportunity to do and have something to show. So, you know, if you're interested in organizing, are you able to organize something and be able to demonstrate that? And then to make contact with our talent executives. You know, as I say, we've got a seminar that's coming up at the moment, and I would absolutely be saying to anybody just to reach out and make contact with people. You know, obviously we work for the BBC, but you know, there are lots of other companies as well that are trying to look around and look creatively to bring people in. And I would just say to, before you do that, is just to do a bit of research, find out a bit about the companies, what do they make, what are you interested in as a person, and have something to say, have something to bring to the table to talk about. I love what you do. This is what I do. Here's something I can bring to you. And I think that's incredibly important as well, to really thought through, you know, what skills do you have and how could they translate to a potential career, you know, in production management, or, you know, what areas you want to go into.
That's great. Do you have anything to add to that, Sahala?
No, that was great.
I think you really didn't hit the nail on the head there, Sylvia, for sure. There's a great question here from Joanna, and she wants to know where we hope to reach in our careers. And I think that's quite a lovely question to kind of give an understanding of the scope that production management has. So similar to Sahala, I started my career as a production management assistant on the One Show, and it took me about a year to work up to production coordinator. I was a production coordinator for about 3 years before becoming a junior production manager. I was a junior production manager for about a year before becoming a production manager. And in terms of other scales from then on, you can go on to become a unit manager, a production executive, a head of production, where you're looking after a slate of a variety of productions in that case, as opposed to kind of like, well, even as production managers, you can still look after a slate, but at that point, you're kind of a department head, I guess. So it definitely is a career path that has so much scope for progression, and you'll always have a kind of a track and a path to be following, which is always, it's quite nice to be assured that you can progress in an area, and I think production management is fantastic for that, for sure. I think,
and I would just add, just very briefly, like, I mean, anyone sort of starting to think in this industry, and you know, as I say, people are coming to this at different ages, different stages. You know, I think production management is also an incredible career, you know, for balancing life. You know, I think I think we're all very aware that, you know, television can be a very busy industry, you know, especially with location work, etc. And, you know, I will say for myself that it's given me opportunities to not only work in this industry and have a long-standing career, but also I have a family. I do the school run. I do lots of other things as well. And, you know, and I think it is a privilege actually to be able to have that balance. And, you know, and I feel like it's a career that has worked for me in that respect as well. So I think for me, I've always found that important to have that balance right across.
Yeah, it's brilliant for that. Sahala, anything?
Yeah, so I'm a production management assistant. I'd like to work my way up. Yeah, so I'm still quite new. And yeah, we'll just see where life takes me. And yeah.
Brilliant. Amazing. There's another question here that says, what does the work relationship look like between production managers and producers on a TV show? You touched on it a bit, Sylvia, in terms of how we are constantly in communication, actually. So, you know, people can see it as quite separate. There's the production managers, there's the editorial, but really on a day-to-day basis, we are in constant communication. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I always say that if a TV show is a project, then production management is up there, are the project managers almost, but within that you do have the editorial team who are coming up with the creative ideas, but actually we're constantly having to be creative with one another, finding solutions, finding different ways to do things, finding the most efficient and cost-effective ways to do it, finding the most sustainable ways to do it, finding the most law-abiding way to do it, or BBC protocols abiding way to do it. So yeah, it is such a collaborative relationship. And even in the production that I was talking through, Legends Never Die, that I was so creatively involved in who we'd interview and where we should film and how we go about filming, with the editorial team as much as them. And they were very much involved with what might be a more cost-effective way to do stuff. So we're not so rigid in our roles that I do this and they do that. It's very much us all pitching in with one another to create the best possible show, because that is the end goal. As a team, we are working to make the best possible show, and whichever way that we can help one another do that is what we do, really. So I don't know if you ladies have anything to add to that.
That was perfect.
Is there any way to pitch a documentary series idea without having worked with a production company before? If not, what would you suggest doing to be able to pitch your ideas? I think that's a really valid question as well. Yeah, idea pitching. I don't know if you ladies have any really helpful techniques with how to do that. I don't really know how it's done in a BBC context unless you're in the BBC, but there might be some stuff that you know externally.
All I would say is that, again, this is where the industry is changing. It is because the industry is constantly looking for ideas. I think, my initial thoughts are actually, I know you've got companies like Channel 4 that are trying to actually fund, or create funds for smaller projects and ideas, and to try and use that as a way of bringing through talent and trying to, again, think differently about the content that we see on our screen. So I'm not an editorial, that's not my area of pitching as such, but I would absolutely say, look on Screen UK, look on various websites, because it is amazing, actually, more and more now, the funding that is available at, a smaller level, but for people to start creating their own projects, because there's an absolute realization that as an industry, we have to be telling the stories of our audiences. And the only way to really genuinely do that is not from an ivory tower, but to go to the people with the stories and fund them to make those stories and get those heard. And, that's obviously I'm based in Bristol at the moment, and I've heard wonderful stories about some of the smaller organizations and companies here that are getting that seedling funding to start on ideas and start on projects that are then able to then springboard them on to doing great, even greater stuff. So just get out there, have a look. But yeah, there's increasing funding available now for sort of smaller projects, and yeah, that's probably the best I can add at this stage.
That's brilliant. I've got another question here that says, are there any training opportunities or courses that you'd recommend to a budding production manager, a new television production graduate? Sylvia, I know you mentioned your master's program, which I thought was really interesting. So it'd be great to learn a bit more about that. But also, the great thing about actually entering production management is that you don't really need to have done anything. I certainly hadn't done anything connected to anything to do with TV prior to starting TV. I think the things that I used to use in my interview was, I used to operate the cameras in my church, and I was like, yeah, I'll put that on my CV. I used to organize things during uni and societies, and I was like, yeah, that'll do. Yeah, we'll talk about that. So that's what I say about transferable skills. Honestly, if you've organized something, you are qualified to be a production manager. So in that sense, I think the great thing is once you're in, there's a lot of support that is offered for upskilling and becoming really qualified in your job, from budget training to more kind of understanding the kind of legal aspects of things and media law, working with children, risks, and how to kind of manage different aspects of production. So there's a lot of support that is actually offered within the organisation for becoming more kind of just adept at your role and really starting to understand all the different areas, especially as you continue to rise up the ranks.
And and I support that completely, because again, I came into TV because I loved TV, not because I necessarily had a broad raft of talents to say tick, 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 that makes me a production manager or anything like that. And again, as Elena's just been saying, I've built my skills over the years, and very much, funnily enough, the reason I did the MA was to build my confidence. That was actually a massive reason for me, and to just give me you know, an opportunity to cover areas that to that point I might have been working in, but may not have actually had a background in, if that makes some sense. So you know, it's about getting out there and doing it. You know, I can't say often enough, just get your friends, pick up a camera, get out there, make something, put on a show, whatever it is, have, you know, build your skills in your time, and then also then come to the table with something to show, this is what I can do. It might be on a small scale, it might be whatever, but you've got something to demonstrate, and come with a passion, and come with a real reason for, this is what I want, this is what I want to do, and this is why I want to do it. And have a, you know the content, know what's out there, have an opinion on it actually, and, you know, I love this, but I would do it better by doing blah, you know, and why would I do this, you know? And it's nice because it shows that you're engaged and that you're paying attention to what's happening on a wider level. But
yeah,
so Sahala, any bits to add?
Yeah, just to add, like, yeah, as Sylvia was saying, you don't really need any specific sort of skill. It's all about transferable skills that you get from the University of Life, about sort of just things that you learn day to day. And I feel like there's nothing more than you learn on the job. And
yeah,
like, I knew nothing 6 months ago, and now that I've just finished my first season on Top Gear, it's all about being able to adapt into different situations and just making sure that you're able to communicate. I think communication is one of the biggest things. You're just constantly on the phone and speaking to different people, and I think it's just really important to be able to just be personable, and I think that's a skill to definitely fine tune as well.
That's brilliant, ladies. Am I okay to do a couple more questions?
I was going to say, I at this point, I will say, I know we've gone slightly over. So in terms of our lovely hosts here at the BYP, I don't know whether you feel that now we should be wrapping up now, or whether there's time for a couple more questions.
I suppose we can start wrapping up. One last question to close out the session would be good.
Okie dokie. As production managers, do you get to travel as well? I'd love to hear about some of your traveling that you've done, Sahala. You talked a bit about Top Gear.
Yeah, so on Top Gear, I'm very lucky that I'm able to travel around. I'm yet to go on a foreign shoot, hopefully next season. But I've been up and down to every single corner of the UK, and someone that's never really traveled the UK, been to everywhere. I know all the service stations very well. And yeah, it's really great to just get out of the home office, especially since my entire career has been at home, outside of shoots. It's really nice just seeing everything happen. And that is definitely something that I enjoy the most of my role, just being able to see the presenters, see the cast, see all the crew, the camera people, the sound people, and just see how it all comes together and how everyone works in a team. And you really get to know everyone really well when you're spending hours and hours with each other on location. So it's a really great opportunity, and it's just where you get to see how your work contributes to the bigger picture of creating the program. So very much enjoy the traveling part of the job.
Yeah, 100%. And it really depends on the program in answer to that question more broadly. Of course, some programs don't even have any international aspects in it. So you wouldn't necessarily travel. I have traveled as part of my job as a production manager, mainly Europe, but some really exciting trips through that. And just like Sahala said, I think the thing I love the most about working in telly is just the access that you get. More so than traveling, it's like the like tiny festivals that I've been to that I literally would never go on my own accord, but I go and it's just the most fascinating and incredible thing in the world, and TV gave me the access to that, you know. So that's what I find actually so fascinating about our jobs, is that you become the best in a party host, the best in table chat, in all the things that you've been able to see and experience. So yeah, it's really exciting. Sylvia, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and again, yeah, all of the above. You know, I think I found myself in Buckingham Palace at one point, and you know, just literally we were doing the Queen's, quite a few years ago, 80th birthday party, and you know, various stars and celebrities and people, and I think you have that slight pinch yourself moment. I've ended up working in Australia and traveling out with crew for that, and funnily enough doing the Deaf Olympics, which was the event at the time, and you know, in sort of traveling with the team and being met at the airport in a limousine, which was crazy because you know, that's how it was set up over there for the event that we were doing. But I think it's it's wonderful and humbling at the same time. And, you know, all that you've been saying about the fact that it really brings home what we're doing and what we're trying to create. You know, I think that's just a wonderful aspect to it all. And even though there's not always the opportunity to travel, but when we do, I think we all really appreciate it, and yeah, make the most of it.
Brilliant. Well, hopefully that was a good place to end.